Welcome back, everyone, to Movies After Midnight.
Hello.
What do you mean we haven't released an episode all month? You're just crazy. We definitely didn't record this episode and then lose the audio and have to record it again like 3 weeks later. That is absurd.
Know what? That never happened. And all you ops out there making up lies about us, we're gonna find you and we're gonna kill you.
What's that TikTok audio that's like the Nicki Minaj thing? Like, ho, you don't even
the the amount of podcasts you've Did you see the one where Megan Thee Stallion was making fun of it and she goes, ho, the amount of sushi you've ordered.
That's pretty good. So yeah, I am your host, Evelyn. I'm joined once again by Erynn.
Hello. Happy to be here.
And we are getting, I was gonna say we're getting funky today with Dracula 1972, and I kind of hate that, but I kind of love that. You know, we'll let you, the folks at home, decide.
I think it works because the tagline for this movie is literally "Count is back with an eye for London's hot pants," and I don't think I ever saw a pair of London hot pants in this movie.
I don't even think hot pants were like that much of a thing at this point in time.
I don't know either. Also, there's a cool as hell car in this. There's a cool car.
I did see that. The poster has it's 70s. It's a very like American car also, despite
and
this
it's
movie
definitely
being
in the movie a couple times, but it just feels like an Easter egg for something you don't know is an Easter egg about.
It's like that Sam Raimi car that he puts in every one of his movies.
Exactly. It's like an H2O when they had the Psycho car.
Oh yeah, I thought you were referring to the Halloween movie, and I thought you were referring to that like SNL bit where it's like H2R or no Cleo.
H2R.
We are. Could you tell it's been a minute since we watched this movie?
I wouldn't reference SNL unless I was referencing the Californians.
You know what? That is wise.
And then this one, I was like, Peter Cushing? What are you doing here? The squad is back together.
Yeah, so yeah, this was Chris and Pete back together again. Shrek and Donkey on another whirlwind adventure.
Their fight at the beginning is crazy.
Yeah, this movie starts at such a high like the end. Usually the movies have kind of like ramped up, like they start kind of on the slower end and then they ramp up. This movie, we just start at like 100.
Oh yeah, and it takes you to wild places. You think you know what's coming after this really serious fight. You'd never guess.
But they're like fighting on a rolling carriage, and it like I was saying I want to see whatever movie this sequence is like the ending of.
Well, I remember you were saying when we were like re-looking at everything, we were giving ourselves a little refresher, and you were saying that some people were saying it's like they don't know what it's for. Like, what were people saying about the opening?
What was it? Because I watched some reviews where they were talking about people really got hung up on the fact that this feels like it's supposed to be a stinger for like a previous movie, but it's not.
But Evelyn and I talk about this all the time. You have to consider the fact that at that time you couldn't really watch movies back to back like that.
Yeah, that was what people got hung up on, was they were like, how does this fit into the like chronology of everything? And I think the simple answer is it doesn't, and all these movies are kind of like meant to be sort of taken on their own.
Well, and like we have been talking about how the movies kind of feed into each other, but like it's almost like proverbial when we say that. It's not like literally meant to pick up where the last one left off. It's just supposed to give you the general vibes of the last one.
Yeah, and it's also, again, we talked about with the last movie, how the last movie was like they kind of left the door open for it to be taken as almost a rebooting of the Dracula series. And so this one even feels like more so like this movie and the one or two that come after it kind of, they could be taken as their own thing without having to like tie them to all the other movies that came before.
I 100% agree with that. And one of the things I do want to say immediately off the bat about this movie is the soundtrack literally sounds like a James Bond film, which is surreal for this film.
Yeah, well,
it doesn't not work, but it's just surreal.
It reminds...
And then the last other thing really quick is that like it's like a silent film in that like the soundtrack never stops. And it accentuates everything you're supposed to feel the whole time. And I really enjoyed it. It grew on me. But what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say it reminds me of like some of those like Dario Argento movies where there's an original soundtrack, but then like the version that we usually get is like this really tense like paced like detective investigation, and then Goblin is just in the background going absolutely ham on the guitar.
Yeah, literally. That's literally what the vibe was, except it's like James Bond. It's like a Bond movie.
Yeah, because it's 1972 and things are, well, it's not yet. Well, we're getting also we talked about how it feels like the opening of this, it feels bigger. Like it feels like, I don't know if they had a better budget, but like the cinematography seemed a lot more like up to snuff in this one, or like not like the other ones had bad cinematography, but like this one definitely did more interesting stuff.
Yeah, it does a lot of cool stuff with POVs that I think the other ones didn't really do. And I think especially in the fight with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, it really enhances it because you get like a lot from Peter Cushing's POV. And it just really helps like sell how rough the fighting is.
Yeah. I have in my notes the DP of this movie was named Dick Bush. And after watching this, I gotta say, I love me some Dick Bush.
Your dad just turned off this episode.
Oh, there's no way he made it this far. But yeah, and then so yeah, we get this part where they're like fighting on top of this carriage, and then the carriage crashes, and they're like kind of stumbling to get up, and they fight some more, and Van Helsing like stabs Dracula with like, he gets impaled on like a spoke of the wagon wheel. And I was saying, this was like one of the, it's not even
wagon wheel 1 2 see. I had to keep the joke I made in the first
what's
one
funny,
that Evelyn didn't get until 2 days later.
You made that joke in the last recording, and I remember it, but somehow I was still caught off guard when you made it this time.
Yeah.
It's just
I honestly forgot I made the joke until you said he got
fresh.
stabbed with the wagon wheel.
Just as fresh today as it was before.
That's Cher for you. She's always relevant.
Honestly, yeah. Where were we? Oh, okay. Considering it's not even like the actual like Dracula death of this movie, I was saying this even felt like one of the better Dracula deaths we've had, because I always say like a lot of times it feels like a dad who's playing with his kids and had to finish up, so he's like, oh, you got me, ooh, I'm dead now. And like this one, it actually felt like the earned result of an act of like a real struggle between the two. So like I
agree with you. I think the only other death that's like second to this one to me is the one where he's like stuck in the water.
Yeah, that one
felt pretty consequential, but the way you just described Christopher Lee's Dracula is that's the realest shit I've ever heard.
It is the most accurate way I can think of to describe most of his deaths, because
so true.
They always have him like stumble around for a bit, and he's just trying to like, I'm definitely it's like that part in Buffy where like she stabs Paul Rubens and he's like making fun of her basically, where he's like, ooh,
Oh, yeah. And honestly, I will say Peter Cushing has been doing some rocky training between the first one and this one, because it is much more of a fair fight.
Yeah, he's been taking his cardio.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Peter Cushing gets like curb stomped in the first one. Oh, my God.
Yeah. But he so we have he stabs Dracula and then he dies. So we get this thing where it's like it is like it's not supposed to be taken as a direct sequel, but it is the idea that these two characters have like, struggled time and again, and then they kind of like die together.
They have a forced dyad.
Yeah, exactly. Why did I think you were going to say they have a foursome?
No.
But
That is not what I was going to say. Get your mind out of the gutter.
Yeah, they die. They're like dramatic battle like ends, and it's that idea if they can, almost like they're tied together, so they have to die together. But as they're dying, a passing stranger.
One cannot live while the. What's that?
I'm not sure what that is.
Harry Potter. What's the prophecy?
Oh God, yeah.
I'll show myself out.
Wow, on this podcast, on this trans woman's podcast.
Oh my God.
I have to bring that up every time.
What do you mean?
Harry
Daniel
Potter
Radcliffe wrote the Harry Potter series.
Oh yeah, Hatsune Miku wrote the Harry Potter series.
It's an
You're right.
autobiography about Daniel Radcliffe.
So a character who we establish later. There's a future, like, it's one of those things where a character plays a guy in the past and he plays a guy in the present, and I think it's supposed to be just like the thematic parallel of like there's always a guy who's there to serve Dracula and like do evil stuff. But like I always like liked to turn it over in my head, like could this be the same guy, or is he just supposed to? But
well, it's also really interesting how Christopher Lee always finds the most horny, insecure guys to like be his like lackeys.
That there's something there.
He just wants to know that he's better than them, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could. I think we kind of got into that with the last movie, where like when he had a guy who wasn't sexually insecure around, he was a little off his game.
And then, like, funnily enough, you find out that part wasn't supposed to go to Christopher Lee, and you're like, that makes sense, because who would ever not pick Christopher Lee?
Yeah, literally. I don't even like men, and I'd pick Christopher Lee.
I love men, and I'd pick Christopher Lee.
If it was Lee and Cushing in the same room, I might go Cushing, but that's a whole other conversation.
And then I named my son Christopher Lee Peter Cushing after the two bravest men I ever knew.
A lot of Harry Potter in this episode.
Sorry, that'll be the last one, I swear to God.
I was trying to think of an unhinged Fantastic Beast quote, and then I remembered I don't remember anything about Fantastic Beasts.
Magique. Magic. Magique. Sorry, now that was the last one. I swear to God.
What was that Jenny Nicholson thing where she's like, I like to imagine when J.K. Rowling was writing this down on the back of a napkin, she was like, boy who becomes a wizard, the snake is a Asian lady.
She goes, the snake is a Korean woman, because like I guess J.K. Rowling on Twitter was like, I had this idea for Nagini the whole time. It's like, okay, Joe.
I don't know why I'm stuck on this now.
Okay, Joe, it's bedtime.
It's this movie.
It kind of worked to transition us to like, it's his son.
I think he's supposed to be like an ancestor of the guy later on, but I was like, you could come up with like a crazy AO3 headcanon where he's like, using dark magic to keep himself young throughout the years. That wouldn't be incompatible with this story, but I don't think there's any reason for you to think that. I thought you were meant to take it the same way you take Peter Cushing, because he's just literally casted as like the
which that ancestor.
Because that was James Rolfe's take on this movie, was he was like, I mean, it kind of makes sense for one character, but it gets a little silly when it's like everyone is just the exact spitting image of their ancestor.
Everyone looks exactly like their ancestors.
That said, I did just see a picture of my mom when she was a kid this morning, that could have been a picture of me, except that I hadn't transitioned by the age that she was in that picture.
Oh my god, that's wild.
So I mean, maybe
Just say it's you.
Yeah, I guess that does happen. But yeah, so we get this thing where I guess he takes some of Dracula's like ashes and his ring and his like all the Castlevania artifacts, and I can't remember what Castlevania that was. You have to. I think it's Castlevania 2. You have to have the ring and
he takes blood and bone fragments so they can.
Yeah. So that they can artificially inseminate a nun with the fetus of Dracula.
This is getting to be an abstract episode.
This is so insane. Like we are. Can you tell we got back to this after a bit of a break?
And also, like, just like life won't like slow down for a second for me, so my brain is like scrambled.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Hope you're at least being entertained, everybody.
Yeah, that's honestly our unhinged podcasts are always my favorite. So we're doing great.
Honestly, it's true.
But
I mean, it has to be as unhinged as this movie, because from the fight scene, we literally go right into a music video.
Well, yeah, so we get this little funeral scene, and we see in the background this servant of Dracula, like, kind of burying his ashes in this graveyard not far from Van Helsing's grave. And then we pan up to the sky, and there's, like, a bird or something, and then a jet plane flies over, and it's like, transition, anime time skip, it's now 1972.
It's like,
and then we
like
get
the James Bond.
This also felt very like a Giallo movie, where you have like the flyover of like opening credit scenes whose only purpose is like, this takes place in a modern city. Look at this modern city where this takes place. The setting is such a modern city, you guys.
Well, I think like the biggest reason a film like this would have to do that with the city, the like sick ass drone shot of the hills.
Yeah.
I think the reason is because everything else was probably sound staged.
Oh,
so
yeah.
they have
well,
to
that's
sell where it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why the Giallo movies do it, because they're like, we have like 2 days on location, and the rest of this we're shooting like on stages in Italy. So like, we need to sell the fact that this takes place in New York or wherever. So I think that's so 100% it.
That is so real.
But yeah, so we cut to an actual music video. There's like a like this hippie band playing at like a house party, and like we spend a bit of time just focusing on them doing their little song. Like, the movie doesn't fully grind to a halt, but it does like slow down a bit to like focus on this song. And
it grinds to a halt to focus on. I was actually really worried at the song. I was like, oh no, I don't know how I feel about this one. But then it's like, and it feels like Casino Royale. It feels like literally crazy. Because it's still the same kind of through line thematically we've been seeing with like, it's just like kind of like a very, you know, in your face take on like the old versus young generation.
Oh yeah. Which I think another review I was reading, they said something like that, like the youth versus older generation subtext of the series is just text in this entry.
Oh yeah. They take the subtext and make it text.
Yeah. So we're introduced. There's like a bunch of like older, because you have that immediately. It is interesting because the movie does like, it presents this conflict, but it never wants you to like hate the younger generation either, because like even in this party, like the hippies are kind of like rabble rousing, but also the older people that don't want them at this event are clearly like the kind of like stuffy, annoying type older people. Like, you're not supposed to sympathize with them at all. Yeah. And then you get like the hippie characters we're introduced to like kind of what becomes our main crew. And there's like this gag where they're like, a guy's like, I called the cops and you all have to get out of here. And then they're like, well, it's a weekend and the police station is over there. So we've got like 20 minutes until the cops show up. And so they're like still kind of fucking around. And then every once in a while, they're like, okay, 10 minutes now. And it's like,
and they're just continuing with the music.
Yeah. And it does serve the purpose of giving this like core group of hippie characters, establishing them as like kind of playful characters that we're supposed to like relate to.
Yeah, I agree with that. That makes sense.
And then there's like the bit of like everyone leaves at the last minute, and there's like the one couple who's still making out under the table. But then we're kind of fully introduced to this group of kids. One of whom is played by Carolyn Monroe, who's done a whole ton of stuff.
And then we have a fan favorite.
Yeah, Marsha Hunt from The Howling 2.
She's the one who lures them into the club, the back room after the club.
Huh. She was also in Hair in London.
Yeah, and she was one of the Bond girls in that one that Sean Connery did, like that wasn't officially Bond, the like Never Say Never Again or whatever.
Oh yeah.
She was one of the Bond girls in that one, if you've seen that one.
And she has had a child with Mick Jagger. Has written 3 novels as well as 3 volumes of autobiography, which include a frank account of her life as a breast cancer sufferer. Holy shit!
What a wild life that
actual Renaissance lady, Marsha Hunt.
Literal actual icon of our times.
Literal.
And I'm so jealous she gets to make out with Christopher Lee.
Yeah, our hippies. There's her. There's Carolyn Monroe. There's this guy who wears like monk robes, and he's kind of like the goofy guy of the group. Jessica Van Helsing is played by Stephanie Beacham, who's also done a lot of stuff. I wasn't as familiar with her work, but she's also would become pretty accomplished after this.
Yeah, she's pretty good. She reminds me. She does. The casting with her and Peter Cushing, I think, is very good.
Yeah.
Because she's his granddaughter, right?
Yeah, well, there's a really sad factoid about that we'll get to in a few scenes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
And her boyfriend, and then they're all kind of, not led exactly, but he, led along by, this guy named Johnny Alucard, because what is subtlety? And he is played by Christopher Neame, who's also done a lot of stuff, and I recognized him as Jarek in the 1997 video game Star Wars Jedi Knight 2, Dark Forces 2.
Oh my god.
So I love that between him and Cushing and Christopher Lee, it's like, if you were in a Hammer movie, the odds of you being involved with a Star Wars project in later on is so high.
I feel like there's a casting director there somewhere.
No, actually, I think I know what it is. It's that George Lucas was a giant Hammer fanboy, so like, because that just feels like time-wise, that feels right.
That makes so much sense.
I guess I love how much we're talking about other movies on this pod. I guess that's people make fun of. There's a line in the first Star Wars where Princess Leia says something like, oh, you can't, and she kind of like, she's saying you can't, but she like affects this like soft British pronunciation for that scene. And according to Carrie Fisher, it's because I think she like spent a bit of time in England, and acting opposite Peter Cushing just like kind of like triggered her memories of England and caused her to kind of unconsciously just affect the British accent a little bit.
You know what? That's so real. That's so real.
And I think about that all the time when I think
feel
about...
like accents are a lot more fluid than people think.
Yeah. Yeah, well, because, yeah, because it definitely, if you live somewhere for a while, it like, especially if you live in multiple
a lot of
places.
Acting training at that time was very like British centric.
Yeah, especially for a certain type of acting.
Mm-hmm.
But excuse me. But yeah, so Johnny he's clearly like, because kind of the subtext to this movie seems to be like that, like, because there's that conflict between the older and the newer generation, and there's this idea that like the newer generation they're good kids, but they're being led astray by like bad influences, and Johnny is like the bad influence. Because they're like, we just want to hang out and be hippies and listen to music. And he's like, hey, what if we did like a satanic ritual? Wouldn't that be cool?
And they're like, okay, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting just comparing it, because I think this illustrates the time period that it's set in, and like how it contrasts against like some of the historical settings where like, because in the historical settings there was always this kind of like caution around the supernatural, whereas here he's like, hey, we could do a satanic ritual, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm sure, like kind of making fun of it, because they're like, they don't even like necessarily believe in that like the devil is a real concept, so they're like, they're not even scared of it, they're just like, that's some corny shit. And he eventually like makes the kind of sells it to him that I think there's even a discussion with Jessica and her boyfriend where he's like, oh yeah, he's gonna like chant some words, we're gonna listen to some records, and then we're gonna get high. And
real
vibes. And then we get
my life.
we get some focus on Jessica's character, who I think of the girls in these movies, I liked her because she does kind of end up like needing to be saved at the end, but I feel like in terms of character, we get a bit more development for her than some of a lot of the women in these.
Yeah, and like I really like how like much she goes to bat for her friends during the experience.
Yeah.
Like she feels like the most fully developed.
Yeah, well, and we also get a good relationship between her and her grandfather. Because that she like goes home, and we're introduced to Lorimer Van Helsing, who is different than the guy from the start of the movie, and he's like the great grandson of the Van Helsing that also fought Dracula back in the day.
Cushing.
Yeah. And this is where, I guess, in the original draft of the script, he was going to be her father instead of her grandfather. But this was the year that Peter Cushing's wife died. And by all accounts, it, like, really, really took a toll on him to the point where he visibly looked a lot older afterwards. And so they rewrote it. And there's I was reading, you can actually in his office, he has a photo on his desk, and that's an actual photo of Peter Cushing's wife.
I think that's
which is
so
like
beautiful.
Yeah, and I always tell that story about Cushing and Lee, because they also made Horror Express this same year, which is another movie I like. I think I've covered it like in one of the episodes where it was just me talking. I'd like to go back to that at some point, but it was a movie that Cushing and Lee did together, and Cushing was gonna back out because he was like, I just need to be alone and grieve, and Christopher Lee was like, I know my friend, and I know he's gonna do a lot better if he has something to kind of keep him busy. So during they like both went out to dinner with the director, and Cushing like was going to like tell the director that he was backing out, and Christopher Lee just like kept boxing him out and dominating the conversation so that he couldn't like back out.
That's
and so that
literally us.
Literally. I mean,
I
kind
think
of.
we've literally been in that situation. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, when my
I
wife
love
died.
that. And you know what? Everybody is like, these B movies, blah, 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 blah. But honestly, that is so beautiful.
Yeah, but I think I can't remember if when we've talked about this, but like I think the dynamic between Dracula and Van Helsing is definitely so good because the two actors themselves like were friends and had a connection.
Oh, yeah. I think 100%.
Which is, I think,
I mean,
another
I
reason
think
why.
every great filmmaker and every great film, you get like that sense that they know each other really well like that, I think.
Yeah. Which is another reason why it's so weird that people weren't as into this one, because a lot of the movies didn't have Cushing, and I feel like having the two of them together is like a big plus for any Dracula movie.
Oh, yeah. Like, I honestly feel like this one is my favorite one.
Yeah, I also think so. I like having, especially now, because I like, I've had a little time to cook, and like my hype for this movie hasn't like died down.
Yeah, because there's something about like Peter Cushing's investigation part that is just stronger than the whole like bad boy running around town with all these ladies has to save this lady from Dracula.
Yeah.
Like there's just something a little bit more meaty to the investigation part that you get with Peter Cushing.
And again, I think it also comes back to him just being someone who's able to like own that like those scenes and like make it interesting when he's doing stuff. But so we get kind of the introduction to him as an occultist, because she comes home and she looks at this book he has of like something on the occult or something, because of what Johnny was talking about. And he's like, oh, hey, what are you doing? And they have this moment where, again, it's like they're on very good terms, where he's like, it's kind of like what Van Helsing always is, where he's kind of like the bridge between the young and the old, where he's like an older guy who like understands the younger people, because he's like, oh, hey, you should like have your friends come over sometime. And she's like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go out and do stuff. And he's like, well, be careful. And she's like, oh, hey, the worst I'm going to do is like have a drink sometimes. Don't worry about it. And it's like, it's very like, I don't know. I really liked their dynamic, because it felt realistically not wholesome, but it's like you can tell that they care about each other, but they also have kind of an understanding. Like, yeah. And then we get to the ritual scene, and I liked this is there's a scene where they get there and they realize that this is the church where her great-great-grandfather is buried, and her boyfriend are like shook up, and they're like, damn, that's really fucked up that Johnny would like take us here. That's kind of like in really bad taste. And then
what the
guy,
fuck, Johnny?
And then the guy in the monk robes like pulls out a mask and he like jump scares them, and they're like, this is her great-grandfather's grave. That was in really bad taste. And he's like, he's a little bit like, oh, come on, it was a joke, but he's also like, oh, I didn't know it was your grandfather's grave. I'm sorry. That is kind of fucked up. And I liked that, because that feels like that's not something you get in these types of movies. Like,
Yeah,
is
I
that
think that's
character
one of the
apologizing?
things. Yeah, well, also you get like a really strong sense that they all feel like actual friends.
Yeah, they're actual friends, and they're like decent people at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They're not just a bunch of assholes.
Which it helps to like transition from this being such a like an entire film about the younger generation versus the older generation, and it kind of becomes a little bit more about like, there's this really interesting quote at the beginning where they're talking about how life is miserable and like short, and I think like that might be the theme that's being like played with a little bit more than like older versus younger generation. So I mean, setting it up so that it's like, it's more about this group of friends and their dynamics as opposed to like them versus this older generation, I think is super helpful.
Yeah. Which also, I think it's interesting because the focus on the group of friends also makes it feel almost like a prototype for like what the slasher genre would become a few years after this.
That's a great point.
because it's interesting too, because this feels so perfectly like the way it's structured with the modern setting and the group of kids. You would almost think it was like doing a take on the slasher genre, but like none of the movies that like made slashers a genre existed at this point, I don't think, because I don't think like Halloween was still a year or two away.
I think yes, we're not to slasher yet at all, for sure. And I mean, it is British, so like it is taking that Hitchcock formula a little further, and you could say like, Hitchcock kind of like pseudo started. I don't think Psycho is a slasher.
That's a
But
yeah, I guess not. Yeah,
I think it's like the stepping stone to get there, but I don't think it is one. And I think if anything, this is like even more towards that like gray area between the two.
Although I guess it makes sense because we were talking about parts of it feel like a giallo, and giallo is kind of considered the connection between Hitchcock and slashers. So I mean, we're all meeting.
I think this was definitely the connective fiber tissue era. I'm a person who I think Black Christmas might be like the first literal slasher.
I think
that's where I mark it.
Yeah,
that's personally where I mark it. But I mean, like the whole friend group getting picked off, like that's like a trope since the beginning of time. You know,
that is true.
It's just a little different than like a true.
But so speaking of the crew getting picked off, so we go in and they start this ritual, and I thought this because we had a ritual in Taste the Blood of Dracula, and it was pretty intense, but this one, I can't remember how I described it before. It was like the other one was more intense, but this one was more ominous, I felt like.
Yes, I completely agree. Are we only at the ritual?
Yeah, we've been sidetracking a lot.
Oh my god.
Well, but also this movie gets rolling after the ritual. It starts rolling way fast. Like,
I personally liked this one a little more. It's a little more horrifying.
Yeah, well, I think because you experience with the characters that shift from, haha, this is like some funny like party game stuff to, oh my god, I think our friend is actually trying to summon the devil right now.
Yeah.
And you get, you get that subtext, because like they never out and out say it, but you kind of get the implication that Johnny deliberately infiltrated this friend group because he wanted to get at Jessica, who's a descendant of Van Helsing. And
he's like sexually targeting everyone in the friend group too.
That too. Because because during this ritual, he like points at her and he's like, "You, Jessica Van Helsing, come here." And then Carolyn Monroe is like, "No, I'm ritual horny. Take me instead." I don't know how to describe it other than ritual horny.
She's speaking in tongues.
I think she's, oh Jesus Christ.
There's some commentary about like divineness being equated to the orgasm, but we shouldn't get into that here.
I think she's also supposed to be a little drunk at this point. I think that, but she like goes up there and he like starts pouring blood on her, and everyone's like, "Okay, we're out, we're leaving. This is too much." And we did, like you said, we get a good reveal of Jessica's character because her boyfriend's like, "Okay, we're getting out of here," and she's like, "No, we have to go back for her. What about her?" And he's like, "It not worth it. We got to get out of here." Everyone bails, and Johnny does finish the ritual, and our boy is back.
Our boy, and wow, what a hottie. Sheesh.
I do really like.
Every time Christopher Lee shows up, I just objectify him. Sorry, back to you.
Yeah, I always, every time, because we watch these like synced up, but like not together, and I always get like texts around that point in the movie to the effect of like, "There he is," or like, "Sheesh," or something.
Like, he is just so hot. I just can't.
Right. Also, I like how they never really get into like Dracula dealing with the modern era. Like, he's acclimated pretty much immediately, which I think
I find that one of the best parts of the movie. He just doesn't get.
Yeah.
He just doesn't care. He's
well,
like,
I think it.
yeah, it's fine.
I think it works for his role as being this like timeless evil, because like his goals and his like aims aren't gonna change regardless of what society is like today. He's kind of about the same stuff.
Unfazed. It's almost like not even like consequential that it's modern too, because like it's not like they try to use any modern techniques to get him.
Yeah, not really. Although also I like how completely unimpressed he is with Johnny, because he comes back and Johnny's like, I summoned you back to the land of the living, and Dracula just looks at him and goes, it was my will, and he just like walks off.
Then he's like, well, you... And then Johnny keeps... Okay, wait, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah. And then so Dracula goes back and he eats Carolyn Monroe.
She's gone.
Yep. And then we get the next day, they're all at the bar together, and Jessica's like, where is she? She's like, I can't remember her character's name now. But where's Carolyn Monroe? I hope she's okay. And they're like, she'll be fine. She'll show up later. And then Johnny shows up and they're like, where'd she go? And he just like pulls out this master class in gaslighting where he's like, what, don't you remember? She said she was going to visit her grandma in this one town. And they're all like, didn't she live in a different town? And he's like, no. And then they're like, what was that ritual thing? And he's like, they were like, you did some crazy stuff. And he's like, you don't remember what happened. You were all high as fuck. And they're like, yeah, I guess you're right.
The funniest thing is that it works, because it's kind of surreal editing that scene immediately after us seeing it. So it just feels like it feels, I think it reads more humorous it reads more funny than it intends to, I think.
Something about the fact that in a movie like this, he was like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. You were all super blazed. And the fact that it kind of works, like, just kills me.
He was living in a single room with 3 other individuals. One of them was a male and the other 2 were female. They were smoking reefers.
But yeah, so like now though, this is like really where things get like rolling, because we get because there's the idea that church ground was like scheduled for demolition, and so that I don't think it was the church ground, but it was like wherever he stashed her body in a construction site that was like whatever was there was going to be destroyed, and that would hide her body. But there's like some younger kids who like sneak in when they're not supposed to be there, and they find her dead body, and that leads the cops to it. And I liked something about that, like when we keep coming back to the generational themes, something about the fact that it's like this group of younger kids like doing doing something other than what they're told, that ends up kind of ultimately undoing the bad guy's plan.
That makes sense.
Like, but that leads to this thing where we get some like police procedural stuff where we have these Scotland Yard detectives like looking into it, and one of them's like, I know this guy who's specialized in occult stuff. She has vampire bites on her neck. I'll go ask him about it. And he goes and talks to Van Helsing. And I can't remember how they make this leap, but somehow they realize that Jessica was either there, or that like it's on record that she was friends with Carolyn Monroe, because
I think it's because they were on record as friends that they go to the Van Helsing house, because he's already like an occult investigator.
Yeah.
So they're tipped off that it's a cult, and then they go to his house, and that's when they catch her, right? And she's like, I don't know.
Yeah, because she gets home and she's like, hey, what happened? And they're like, your friend died. Do you know anything? And she pretty much immediately tells them everything.
Yeah.
Which, again, I think underlines that idea that, like, none of these kids are, like, once she knows what's up, she's not going to, like, keep information secret or anything.
Yeah.
And that kind of, inadvertently, that's what brings Van Helsing onto this case, because he's like, he knows enough that he's like, this kind of sounds like some Dracula stuff. And the other guy's like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but you're welcome to like look into it. And we have, I can't remember what the deal is, because I think Johnny makes another attempt to like get.
Well, Johnny gets I think he gets our chick next.
Yeah.
Because he takes her to, like, they like make out in his room, and then he takes her to Dracula, and then Dracula's like, this is not who I wanted.
Yeah, I wrote that down again. Dracula's really, really not into Johnny as a servant.
Not into Johnny. He's not even upset at her. He's just like, Johnny, what the frick is wrong with you?
Johnny, you are so bad at this. You have one job. What is your deal, dude?
Oh my God, Johnny, I can't wait to get you next. Jesus.
Yeah, and then that's and then he
doesn't
starts
discriminate. He makes out with her and kills her, and I was jealous.
Yeah, oh yeah. But I like, because Johnny keeps begging him. He's like, this would be easier if you would give me some of the power you promised. And Dracula's like, he's kind of reluctant. He's like, okay, fine, I guess. Which I like, because they've kind of, I feel like by this point in the series, they've kind of changed what vampirism is an allegory for. But if we go with like the way it was presented in the first Hammer movie, this is just Johnny begging Dracula for like a gay hookup, and Dracula not being into Johnny and being like, I guess if you'll shut up, we could
It's also interesting how different characters react to like being under Dracula's control. And I really I think it says a lot that his character becomes more petulant with time.
Oh yeah. It kind of reminds me of what we were talking about in Gothic with Lord Byron, where like he's got this persona of like, I'm this edgy badass who lives outside society's rules, and then the more you peel back the layers, that's just a front for this like you said, this petulant loser who just like doesn't want people to tell him what to do, and like wants to think he's cooler than he is.
1,000%. Because the other two friends, they kind of get killed pretty quick. Like, one of them even kind of gets, like, an off-screener.
Yeah, well, because, we never see what happens to the monk robes guy, I don't think. Unless I just missed something. He's just out. But, and, yeah.
You're right, the movie does really speed up.
We do get, because there's a scene where Johnny, now that he's a vampire, he goes out and, like, hunts someone for himself, and we get more of that, like, 70s rock that like amps up. As I think they do like kind of one of those things where like Johnny's like on the hunt, and then it's cut against like Van Helsing like getting his vampire hunting tools together and investigating.
Oh yeah, that's when he goes into like the holy water and he like shoplifts it from the church.
Yeah, that's right. And he kind of gives us like a retread on how vampires are hunted in this continuity,
which very much like the Howling 2 now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, which I
like
mean honestly,
getting all the holy grail and everything together.
I feel like we need to watch the Howling 2 again after having watched all these, so we can get the ways in which that's referencing this stuff.
You know what? We should. I think we should do like an extra episode.
We need to watch the Howling 2 once a year as a religious experience.
I think we should. It should be a Yap Temple event.
Exactly. That's like what there's a podcast where they do that. They pick like one movie and they just watch it again and again for every single episode. Every like
hilarious.
Season isn't one movie. But
That's hilarious.
It gets unhinged so fast. But yeah, I'm trying to remember the connective fiber now.
You know, so, and then now I think we're getting to Johnny's death now, because the next note I have is that I really like how there are different levels of threats to vampires, because I feel like in a lot of vampire media there's like, it's like there are these blanket weapons that have like a blanket effect on all vampires that's the same for each weapon, it seems like, but in this one you really get a sense that like certain things affect them more and less.
Yeah, we do. Before we get to that, there is like this bit because we have a bit where Johnny lures Jessica's boyfriend in and makes him a vampire, and Van Helsing and he lures Jessica and takes her captive, and that's what leads Van Helsing to track down Johnny. And that was the most abrupt part of this movie, because there's this other girl who's part of the friend circle that we don't see that much, and Van Helsing's looking around trying to find Jessica, and this other girl approaches him, and she's like, oh, hey, if you're looking for Johnny, he lives here. I hooked up with him once, and it was super weird, but that's probably where you should go. and then she leaves the movie.
And you know what? I respect the hell out of that. She got out of town.
This is maybe my favorite one of these, but that is like the one very disjointed because movie thing that happens.
It's also like such a like soundstage street it's happening on too.
Yeah. Well, I think as it happened, because he's standing outside a theater or something when it happens, so I was like, what meta commentary on the nature of media, the revelatory nature of cinema, that he gains this information outside a theater.
Outside a movie.
Also, outside the nightclub, because we get several shots like of the street outside this nightclub, and there's a store that's like Chelsea Men's or something, and I was like, did they pay for product placement? Because their sign is like so front and center in all of these scenes.
Well, and like the budget is higher. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked.
But then we get to Johnny's apartment, and this is a really good, like, again, a really good Van Helsing vampire fight.
Oh yeah, this one was sick as fuck.
Because I like what a big dick move like Van Helsing enters the room with, because he half throws a Bible across the room so it lands in the coffin, so that Johnny's repulsed by his own coffin, and he's like, oh hey, you'll be wanting to get in that coffin, and
the sun's starting to come in.
Yeah, and again,
and then
like
he gets
you said,
like a mirror and he bounces it off and uses it as like a Gatling gun.
Yeah, which again, I think a lot of this fight goes back to what you were talking about, where Johnny's revealed to be more petulant over the course of the movie, because it's like, by taking on the role of a vampire, he's basically just made himself like even weaker to all these things that wouldn't have affected him if he'd kept his humanity.
Yeah, because he would have definitely made the encounter. He would have made it out.
And and because he decided to become a vampire, it's that causes him to kind of like go down like a little bitch, for lack of better terminology.
Oh yeah, Van Helsing gets him all the way up the stairs.
Yeah, and this is a really good vampire death. Did you want to go into that?
No, you reveal. Okay. I thought you were going to move on out of the scene without revealing it. I was like, wait a minute.
Okay, no, well, yeah, because we were talking about it earlier.
Yeah, it's sick.
So so earlier Van Helsing is talking about the weaknesses vampires have, and something the Hammer movies are a little more keen on than a lot of vampire mythology is the old chestnut of vampires can't cross running water.
Mm-hmm.
Or that they're weak to running water, and so he he backs Johnny into his own bathroom, and like Johnny stumbles into the shower and turns the shower on, and the running water is like basically kind of ripping him apart and keeping him immobilized. And I think Van Helsing does something. He gets him to tell him where Jessica is, and then he leaves him there, and he dies like a dork in his own shower.
Oh yeah.
And but also as pitiful as the character is, Christopher Neame does such a good job making him both like credible as a vampire and believable as like this guy who gets completely unraveled. Like,
oh yeah, I think part of what makes that his final death work so well is like the fact that he's acting his little heart out.
Yeah, well, I was thinking the fact that he's like 'cause, like, Johnny is nowhere near Dracula's level, but in terms of performances, the fact that he's able to like hold his own in a movie where he's standing next to Christopher Lee and next to Peter Cushing, like, I feel like says a lot.
Oh yeah, I agree.
And then Van Helsing tracks he tracks Dracula down to the initial church, and he finds
onto the final fight.
Yeah. And we get a good it feels very, this also felt very Castlevania, where he's like Dracula's gonna like suck Jessica's blood or whatever, and Van Helsing shows up and he's like, "Hey, look at my face. You recognize me, don't you? Because of this is the face of my ancestors," or some line like that. And Dracula does have kind of like a weird,
it makes so much narrative sense that like Van Helsing literally looks like the Van Helsing that killed Dracula. Like, it's very helpful, and so I think it helps sell that last moment for sure.
Yeah. And it, again, it feels very Castlevania, where you have like Dracula just, and this bloodline kind of keep coming back to, no matter how many times Dracula returns, there's always one of these guys.
Yeah.
And so they have a little scuffle, and in this one, Van Helsing is a little more outmatched against Dracula. He hasn't fought him nearly as many times as his great grandfather has.
Oh yeah.
And we do get, Christopher Lee has a really good line here where it's, I can't remember what it is, but it's something like, you would do battle with me, who has conquered nations, and something or other. It sounds really cool. And we do get they kind of try to bring Jessica into the conflict too, because it's like he knocks, Dracula stumbles and falls, and there's like a crucifix that Van Helsing was going to use, and he's trying to like get Jessica to use it, and Dracula's like using his mind control on her, and she ends up, that's what's happening. I think Dracula ends up like stuck, and she like pulls it out or whatever.
Yeah.
And
because he pulls off her crucifix that he gives her, that Van Helsing gives her. And it goes back to that like levels where like Dracula's strong enough that he can rip off the crucifix and it just hurts really bad, and they need to like go all the way to get him.
Yeah. And so you have, again, like, this is a little more that we get a little more back to the like Dracula dying abruptly, but I do think this one led into it a lot more organically.
I agree.
Because they kind of fight their way outside, and I think Van Helsing kind of set this up, but Dracula, like, where he sets it up so Dracula like stumbles back and falls into this grave where he set up a bunch of stakes, and he dies in the Van Helsing family grave.
They got him.
And I can't remember what it's like in Latin, because it's like now Jessica's free of the Dracula spell, and she's like, "Oh shit, I'm sorry, that was really fucked up," and he's like, "It's okay," and he reads the whatever it is, it's like the Latin inscription on the grave. It's like something like Requiescat Ultima or something like that.
Some Catholic stuff like that.
Requiescat in pace ultima, I think. If I remembered that correctly, I'm gonna feel so smart.
Sounds right to me. And I grew up Catholic.
And yeah, we get that fade out where it's, again, the ending was a little abrupt, but it did feel, everything that happened felt earned in a way that some of the movies...
Yeah, and I don't mind the abrupt ending because you get such good moments like the beginning and like the death for the whatchamacallit, his like, little lackey Johnny. So
yeah.
I almost don't mind that the final death is a little abrupt,
Yeah, because it's about the journey. Yeah.
Because I also like how it happens in the like grave of the Van Helsings.
Yeah, it kind of puts a bow on the whole
really
generational.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
But
yeah, and
yeah,
that
this
is
is my favorite one for sure.
yeah,
So far.
I really I will be really interested to get your thoughts on, because the next one is the only Dracula movie that I had seen before this.
What's the next
It
one?
is was it the Satanic Rites of Dracula, I believe?
Oh yeah.
And it yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Um but yeah, a lot of people weren't really into this one, and I get, like, if someone's like, I want to watch like a Hammer Dracula movie, you might show them like what
Probably
was
the
it?
first one.
Yeah, or like I was gonna say, I think Dracula's Risen and Taste the Blood are probably my favorites after this, and I'd say those are pretty quintessential to like what people think of when they think of a Hammer Dracula. But
Mine is
once
definitely
you
this one, and then Taste the Blood. So I see what you mean.
yeah, but like, because this one departs from the formula a bit, and so that's like the only reason that I wouldn't have someone start with this, where it's like you get the formula first, and then you see how this one like breaks from it. But
That's true, because I think one of the selling points is how good it breaks from it.
Yeah.
And it's a good time, because I feel like if another film fell into that same setup, it might have started to get redundant.
Yeah, well, the last one we were talking about how it felt like once it hit act 3, it just started going in slow motion practically.
Oh yeah.
So I think that was literally what happened, and that's why they shifted up the time frame. But again, I think, yeah, pacing wise and character wise, there was a lot that like kept me engaged in a way that some of these haven't.
I agree.
And it is a solid time for sure.
Solid time. Yeah, I had a great time.
And I'm a Dracula 1972 apologist.
Me too. Everyone's crazy. It reminds me of how everyone said The Howling 2 was the most confusing thing they'd ever seen, and then I watched and I was like, it's really not that confusing.
Yeah, it's pretty
Silly,
straightforward.
Yes. A little silly. I can't argue with that. Confusing. Are you just confused?
The Howling 2 is a very serious and artful meditation on...
Would I say serious and artful, or would I say a straightforward experience? I don't know.
I was trying to figure out what it's a meditation on.
It's a meditation
witchcraft
on
and
the
crazy
nature
werewolf
of
sex.
threesomes that are really hairy.
That, exactly. And on the fact that Christopher Lee's character and Steerba were totally, like,
they were totally
a thing.
banging.
Yeah.
They were totally a thing. They were totally a thing.
I love how we can't, like, The Howling 2 is our... I don't even know what it is. It's the nexus. It's the glue that holds this podcast together.
Honestly, yeah. I'm just so glad that I've reclaimed The Howling 2 in my life.
Yeah, this has kind of been the perfect journey to do that.
It really has.
But,
we'll miss you
yeah,
guys.
so
we'll be back in not a month. Hopefully.
Yeah, a little sooner than that.
Life willing, you know. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
We'll be back way sooner.
Yeah.
And then we have exciting changes for later this year.
Oh yeah.
We can't talk about those yet though.
Crazy times for the Berry Club. That's
a
webcomic reference no one's gonna understand.
Crazy time for the film snob witch coming.
There we go. But yeah, we've got crazy stuff for the podcast in the long-term future. Crazy stuff for the Dracula series in the immediate future. Where we got stuff.
A lot of crazy times coming, everyone.
DJ Crazy Times.
DJ Crazy.
I have an idea. World peace.
World peace. I can't believe you made that joke before me. I can't believe this.
Click on the draw.
Out Eurovisioned.
I will. Yeah, we'll see you guys next time for some Satanic Rites of Dracula.
We'll see you next time where we're gonna do a satanic rite
on podcast.
On podcast.
Satanic rights, satanic lefts.
Oh my god. Yes. Bye.
We need to take it out. Blah blah.
Blah,
Bye.
blah, blah. Everyone.
Hey everyone, Evie here. If you enjoyed today's episode of Movies After Midnight, consider giving us the old like and subscribe so that you can stay up to date when we drop new episodes. If you didn't enjoy today's episode of Movies After Midnight, consider following me on one of the many social media platforms out there and leaving criticisms or strongly worded hate speech. Either way, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully I'll see you next time.